Well, this week stunk, didn't it? The Phillies went 1-5 against the Mets and Nationals. Yoenis Cespedes just hit another home run. No, wait, that's Bryce Harper. Excuse me. It's okay. We have the antidote for you. Jayson Stark is going to talk about Don Carman. Yes. We also have Scott Kingery talk. Yes. The Phillies Nation Podcast is here for you, Phillies fan. Get psyched. Episode 4. Yo, Phillies Nation. Welcome to the Phillies Nation Podcast. It is episode 4. My name is Tim Malcolm. I'm the editorial director of PhilliesNation.com. Go to PhilliesNation.com for all your Phillies news, rumors, information, and more. Check us out on Facebook at Facebook.com/PhilliesNation, Twitter at PhilliesNation, and Instagram at PhilliesNation_. This podcast will be found and can be found on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and on YouTube at youtube.com/PhilliesNation. Please rate and review us on iTunes. We love 5-star reviews. We love all reviews, but please check us out. Subscribe. Tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell your family members about the Phillies Nation Podcast. We do it every Monday, and we try to get it out around noon on Monday. So it was a terrible week for the Phillies. I think we're not going to sugarcoat that too much, okay? It was a terrible, terrible week for the Phillies. They lost 5 games of the 6 that they played against teams that we would rather try to beat as much as possible in the Mets and the Nationals. They got waxed by the Mets one night. They lost a couple tough ones, and then against the Nationals, they almost won 2 of 3, and then Bryce Harper decided to inject a little bit of home run power into the Sunday afternoon festivities with 2 bombs, including a game winner with 2 outs and 2 strikes in the 9th. Absolutely terrible, and it just really was a letdown. I will say this, though. Bryce Harper is one of the best players on earth, and if he's going to beat you with a 2-out, 2-strike home run, even if it's a fastball down the middle, but it was a fast fastball, so be it, so be it, so be it. That's it. That's the way it is, man. That is the way it is. But there are other more pressing matters that we have to talk about. By the way, on the podcast today, we do have Corey Sharp from PhilliesNation.com talking to us about those pressing matters of the week that was. Also talking about Cesar Hernandez, who's playing really well, Scott Kingery, and other prospects. And our big special guest today is a good friend of ours and an awesome, awesome baseball mind. You know him. Everybody does. Jayson Stark of ESPN.com and ESPN and all these other places of the sports, the leader in sports coverage, will be on with us a little bit later to talk about the Phillies and his youth and 64 and some awesome stuff. And Don Carman, really good stuff. But the week that was, and a really, really interesting week it was, because as much as the Phillies lost, they made some narrative headlines, man. Oh, boy. Let's talk about Monday night. Last Monday, Phillies-Mets tie game, 7th inning. Edubray Ramos comes in, nobody out, as Drupal Cabrera at the plate. And a 97-mile-per-hour fastball just over Cabrera's head that put him on. A couple batters later against Joely Rodriguez, Jay Bruce said, "Oh, Mets lead." So, Edubray Ramos said the ball slipped. That's what he said. And because he said that, we have no other way of knowing whether he ever meant to throw the ball at Cabrera. That's what we can take as fact, right? That's what we know. Journalistically, that is it. If he says the ball slipped, nobody else can tell us any different. Unless Cameron Ropp comes, later on and says, "Oh, no, it didn't slip. He actually threw at him." Or Edubray Ramos publishes a tell-all book later on in his life. We're not going to know the truth except for that he said it slipped. Now, at the moment, I said that there's no way that Edubray Ramos tweeted this at Phillies Nation. There's no way that Edubray Ramos would have thrown a Cabrera in that situation. Nobody out, tie game. You're not going to throw at him. Then a bunch of Mets fans came back and said, remember when Asdrubal Cabrera hit a game-winning home run off of Edubray Ramos in September of 2016? And then Cabrera did a massive bat flip that was pretty awesome. And then I said, forgot about that. Because I forgot about a lot of what happened in September 2016. But that gives you a little bit of a, maybe Ramos was throwing at him. But he said the ball slipped. So Pete Mackanin talked to Ramos about it, which is weird because if the ball slipped, then why would you have to talk to him about it, right? But look, we can say that it's very possible that Ramos was aiming at Cabrera for, a little bit of a message pitch. Oh, I remember the bat flip. I'm going to throw at you a little bit. So we can say that, right? Here's my opinion. I don't like when pitchers throw at batters. I don't like the machismo of this is my mound, this is my game, you play by the rules. And that's an opinion that some people disagree with. I know people disagree with this, but this is my opinion. I think that whole part of baseball is ridiculous. And I think this idea of respecting the game because, if a guy flips a bat after a home run, oh, that's disrespectful. No, it's not. It's disrespectful to your belief of what baseball is supposed to be. Other people, and this happens a lot in Latin countries because this is what happens, celebrate when they get a big hit or celebrate when they get a walk. Odubel Herrera does that, right? We see Odubel, we love it. It's hilarious, right? That's what it is for people who play that game that way. They want to celebrate because, by the way, baseball is a child's game that now people get paid millions of dollars to play. And yes, there is a responsibility, but part of that responsibility is showing people that A, it's a game, while B, being professional. And you're not being unprofessional if you flip a bat after a hit. I mean, you're not being unprofessional. You're being unprofessional if you're aiming a ball at someone's skull. And whether or not Edubray Ramos was doing that, that's the wrong thing. You don't try to injure someone. You don't send a message that you're going to try to injure someone. That's wrong. That's violent. That sucks. That's not what belongs in a child's game. And Pete Mackanin was talking about bat flips. He talked about it in the vein of Odubel Herrera. And he said, I know there's a big contingent of people that think it's fun, quoting from a Jim Salisbury article, let the players enjoy it. But if I'm a pitcher on the mound and I'm trying to make a team or stay on a team or not get sent down, I don't want somebody rubbing it in when a guy hits a home run off me. Fans might like to see it, I guess, but for me it's just unprofessional. Yeah, fans like to see it. They pay money to come to the ballpark and enjoy themselves and be entertained. It's entertainment. That's what it is. We pay money for it. Bat flips are fun. That's what it is. Not fun is someone throwing a ball at someone's head. That's not fun. Edubray Ramos, if he was throwing at Asdrubal Cabrera, should not be on this team. He should be suspended. He should be sent down. As he said, though, the ball slipped. That's his truth. We have to go with that. We have to respect that, and he stays on the team. But I'm telling you this right now. Pete Mackanin saying that these players, there's a disrespectfulness about it, or you could see why you get mad at that, or it's unprofessional, or whatever he's saying. That's not the right message to send to your team. The right message to send to your team is to go in the media and say, anybody who throws a ball at another player is not welcome on this roster. That is it. Now, that was the big story early in the week. Later in the week, we got the Clay Buchholz problem. He gave up a bunch of runs to the Mets and then left the game early. An MRI revealed that he might be out for the rest of the season. No full volume ending conclusion on that yet, but we do have a Zach Eflin start on Tuesday against the Mets. Hopefully his fortunes are a little bit better than Clay Buchholz's are. If it is the end of Buchholz's season with the Phils, well, that stunk, huh? Unfortunate, we wish that Clay gets better, of course, but it sucks because it's someone that we thought was going to be part of this rotation all year and it just didn't work out that way. But it's unfortunate, and hopefully he does get better. But now we start the whole Lehigh Valley system, right? Eflin will get the first crack. If he does well, then he stays on the team. And if not him, maybe it's Nick Pivetta, who's throwing really well. Jake Thompson scuffling a little bit to start the year. But we got a lot of guys who are going to come up and try to do their thing. So hopefully Eflin does his thing on Tuesday. Meanwhile, the Phillies bullpen continue to have some trouble, especially Sunday against the Nationals with Joaquin Benoit giving up the big home run to Harper. As I said, Bryce Harper hitting a home run in the ninth inning. That's fine. Look, he's a great player, and it's what happens. And it was a 3-2 fastball down the middle, but it's okay. He's a great player. It's what happens. That's it. It's okay. Benoit should still be the closer of this team. I think Genmar Gomez should not have been closer to begin the season. I think we make too much of a deal about closers. I think we need guys on this team who can get guys out late in games. Benoit has done that for the most part, except for that last home run by Harper. Hector Neris has done a fantastic job, and I think should be brought in to face tougher hitters whenever possible. Whether it's the 9th inning or the 8th inning or whatever, even the 7th inning, he should be the guy in those situations. Benoit should be a guy in those situations too. Pat Neshek has done a nice job. He should also be relied on. And hopefully Ramos becomes that guy too. He had a tough go at it earlier in the week, but hopefully he gets himself going as well. Joely Rodriguez, tough start to the year. We'll see what happens there. But certainly the bullpen is a work in progress. It's the least thing that we have to worry about with this team right now. We have to worry more about the starting pitching, which has been up and down, but a little bit better. We'll talk to Corey Sharp about that in a little bit. And the offense. Franco needs to get better, needs to get bigger hits. We need a star player on this team. Right now, that star player is Cesar Hernandez, who leads the team with 3 home runs. We'll talk about him later on with Corey Sharp. Phillies offense needs to get themselves going a little bit better. And again, big star player. That's the big deal right now. We need to find someone in this roster who's going to emerge and be the guy. It's not happening yet. Certainly, if that doesn't happen, we're going to have a very long season looking for that guy. But it's early. It's April. The Phillies aren't playing well. But hey, didn't we see that coming already? So it was a bad week for the Phillies, obviously, with all the losses. There were some bright spots, though, as there were some good pitching performances. And we want to talk about both the good and the bad in the pitching. And I have Corey Sharp here from PhilliesNation.com. I wrote a piece, Corey, on Sunday at the website about Vince Velasquez and about a lot of people talking about whether he should be in the bullpen and maybe it's time to move him there. But I wrote about how Velasquez maybe needs to be stretched out to the umpteenth percent and be sort of a 120, 130 pitch guy. What are your thoughts on Velasquez in the short-term future?
Well, what's going on now isn't working, and but I'm not sure if Pete is willing to do that kind of thing. He took out Eichhoff today. I think he had 94 pitches through 6 innings, and he could have easily went a 7th inning, but I don't know why he doesn't, extend his starters. But yeah, that's what I would try it.
So you think that Velasquez, even if he's getting over the 100 pitch barrier in the 4th or 5th inning, just let him go and because I've done a lot of research on Nolan Ryan and he's a very interesting pitcher because through his career, he struck out an unfathomable amount of people, right? 5,714 career strikeouts, but he also walked the most people ever, 2,795. He would walk 170, 180 people per season at his peak, and it got better as his career went on. But why not stretch it out if you're Pete Mackanin? It's early in the year, but I really think if you have a guy who can throw 10, 11 strikeouts per 9 innings, why not go big on him? So you agree with me?
I do, yeah. He would end up striking out probably 13 or 14 guys a game. You'd see those strikeout numbers rise. And obviously the innings pitched would go up. Yeah, he would be getting through 6 or 7. And, he would be saving the bullpen. And then, it may work out better for him. He may, when the stakes are higher like that, it may cause him to focus a little bit more. So why not?
Jared Eichhoff has 19 2/3 innings here in his first 3 games. That's not 7 innings per start, although he's pitched as if he can go 7 innings per start. But Aaron Nola is another one who we were really worried about going into the season, but he's pitched pretty well. He has 11 innings of work, 3.27 ERA. He's given up 13 hits in the 11 innings, but he struck out 13. So it looks like he's definitely what we want him to be at this point. What are your early thoughts on Nola?
I obviously liked what I've seen. I think it's about time now that we stop worrying about him being injured. I think that now he needs to be put on the same plane as everybody else, and and critique him like he's just another pitcher. I think he's healthy. He's throwing 95. That's something he wasn't even doing last year. And I mean, did you see that strikeout to Bryce Harper? I mean, that was some pain. It was 95, and he wasn't 95. You know, he wasn't throwing 95 last year,
right?
When he was completely healthy the first 2 months. So, like I said, I think it's time we start putting him on the same plane as Eichhoff and Velasquez, and let's go. He's healthy.
You're talking about the Harper strikeout on Friday, and man, that thing, like his tailing fastball when it is on point. He painted that low outside corner, and it was one of the best pitches I've seen him throw. I mean, he has good stuff, but I always get a good Cliff Lee vibe out of him because he's got the ability to paint with a fastball, which is very hard to do, and not a lot of pitchers can do that with regularity. But he looks like he's on again. Yeah,
I mean, and when it's 95, it makes it better, for Nola. So I hope that keeps up.
Now, another pitcher who obviously is pitching well to start the year is Jeremy Hellickson, and again, he's at least getting a little bit more room with Pete McCann. Maybe he's a veteran, that's why. But he has a 1.59 ERA. He did get hooked in the first 2 outings of his season with 5 innings each, but because of other, problems. I mean, the first game, it was his first start of the year, so maybe I kind of understand that. The second one, he left with a little bit of an injury, but now he pitched pretty well in his third start, going 7 innings. But here's the thing that I worry about with Hellickson. He has 5 strikeouts and 3 walks to start the season in his 17 innings. That is not sustainable. Are you worried at all about Hellickson, or you think he's going to be able to win with smoke and mirrors?
I think he goes through his spurts with strikeouts and pitching to contact. I'm not worried about him. He's a veteran. He's been there. He's former Rookie of the Year, and I definitely think pitching in the National League helps him. He kind of wore out his welcome there in Tampa Bay, but he's the least guy I'm concerned about. I mean, I expect him to go out there and give you 6 or 7, and give up 2 or 3, and sometimes a lot of times he even exceeds that. So, like I said, he's the last guy I'm worried about.
Yeah, I mean, as long as these pitchers get some run support, Jared Eichhoff, his last 2 starts, his last start, he didn't get much run support, and then the Phillies came back late in the game, and then they lost, of course. But Eichhoff has obviously been the big victim over his career. But, yeah, it's been a tough go for these guys because I think you want to see them get 7, 8 innings, consistently, but part of the problem is it's the 5th or 6th inning, and the Phillies are down by 2 runs, and they need a pinch hitter to come up, because Freddie Galvis is hacking at something that will pop up on the infield, and you need to get somebody in there. So I think the rotation's been good so far, but obviously some sore spots. You want to see Velasquez kind of get himself right a little bit, but again, I think if we just let him go, like if he's a dog, let him roam free and bite people all game long. Let him just do it. Otherwise, I think the pitching staff is what we kind of thought they were, right?
Yeah. I mean, with Velasquez, I think that's like you want to compare him to something. He's a dog. He's a horse. He's your horse. He's your guy. Yeah, right. And you throw him. You just thrust him in there and you let it go. But as for the rotation, I mean, this was going to be the strength of the team. And then, of course, along with the bullpen, how much improved it's been from last year. But all in all, I think it's been a good showing, at least for the pitching overall, for the most part.
Corey Sharp from PhilliesNation.com. We'll talk to you a little bit later on in the show.
Okay, sounds good.
My guest this week on the Phillies Nation podcast is somebody you will know if you're from Philadelphia, of course. He covered the Phillies for years for the Philadelphia Inquirer. He's now on ESPN, ESPN.com. He works on Mike and Mike in the mornings. He does everything baseball-related for ESPN. And he just recently actually was inducted, he'll be inducted at least, into the Philadelphia Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. That'll be May 23rd. Jayson Stark, welcome to the Phillies Nation podcast.
Tim, thanks for having me, man. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks. And congratulations on the Jewish Sports Hall of Fame induction. That must be a huge honor for you.
It's so cool. It's one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me. There's a lot of my friends and a lot of my Philadelphia sports heroes who are in the Philadelphia Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, and I don't know how I got somehow elected to this club, but it's really cool to be there.
And I mean, I wanted to ask you because in a couple of the interviews that I've done so far for the podcast, your name has actually come up more than once, and
really,
all for good reasons. And we talk about how influential you kind of have been for a lot of writers, especially my generation. I'm in my 30s. Do you think about that with the Jewish Sports Hall of Fame induction coming up too? Do you think about like what kind of legacy you're leaving in baseball writing?
Well, I've never really thought of that. I don't know if I've reached the legacy stage, but I've always been grateful for the people who helped me when I was trying to figure it out, and so I've always tried to be one of those people who helped whoever came along and asked for help. Actually earlier today was swapping emails with a aspiring college sports writer who I met in spring training, sat next to him in a press box. And I told him to keep in touch. He keeps in touch. You know, he sends me stuff. He writes. I try to write back.
That's right.
The greatest contribution I ever made probably was the great Tyler Kepner, who covers baseball for the New York Times and is really one of the best baseball writers in America.
Certainly.
When he was like 14 years old, he wrote to me and said, "Hey, when I grow up, I want to do what you do." And I feel like there are some people out there like that, but every once in a while, I mean, I hear the same thing that you're telling me. Somebody will say, "Hey, reading you was a great influence on me," or "That's one of the reasons I wanted to be a sports writer." I mean, I don't know what that means in terms of legacy, but it's really tremendous to hear that and feel like you helped somebody find their way in life, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, me and so many others, I think, can attest to reading your Sunday, baseball week pages in the Inquirer in the 1990s and such, and using that as sort of a platform for, this is how you can do it. Which leads me to, I think, getting to kind of you growing up in Philadelphia. I mean, when you were a kid, did you go to Connie Mack Stadium and sit there and as the Phillies were giving up 8 runs in an inning, say, I don't know, maybe the Phillies haven't given up 8 runs in an inning on a Saturday. I have to look this up somehow. Has that ever happened? Was that happening when you were a kid?
I wasn't quite at that stage when I was like 9 years old. Sorry, but I'm not that sick. But I'll tell you what I did do, and I wrote about this in my Wild Pitches book. I used to go to the games as a kid with my binoculars, and I swear this is true. I take those binoculars out and I train them on the press box, trying to figure out what those people were doing up there. Huh. And I don't know how to explain this except that I loved sports, and I guess I was one of the smart ones. I figured out early on I wasn't going to be good enough to actually play sports professionally. And my mother was a writer. She had some newspaper friends. I just thought, wow, this would be a really cool thing to do someday. So I was always curious about it. And like the part where I decided, when's the last time this happened, or I never saw that before, I don't know when that came along, but now I'm imprisoned by that mentality. Help!
That's become how you're defined, I think, in a lot of ways. We were talking off air about how just today you were looking for an instance in which an outfield had the same last name, all 3 people in the outfield.
Right, the White Sox. It's Friday, April 14th. The White Sox are starting an outfield of all guys named Garcia tonight, and all over Twitter, people feel like they have to tell me this, and they need to ask me the last time this happened. And this is my lot in life. This is the niche I've carved out for myself. Every day something happens in baseball, and somebody will say to me, hey, you would appreciate this, or only you would know this, or hey, I got to tell you this, or when's the last time this happened, or something like that. And it just makes me laugh that people think that I'm just this walking encyclopedia of weirdness.
Well, yeah,
and
I mean,
I am.
But you were that guy, definitely at the Inquirer. I mean, you had, the weird box score line of the week, and the rumblings and grumblings, of course, and all that stuff. But it must be neat to have that niche, and especially because baseball is, anything, and every day you see something new, right? I mean, that's one of the old cliches, is that every game you'll watch, there's something new that you haven't seen before. So you're kind of like the king of that,
I've become the king of that. It's funny that you say that, really, because my mother a million times told me, you need to write a book and call it I Never Saw That Before. And one of these days I might actually do that.
No, that'd be great. No, I think that'd be a big seller too.
Right. And I've written so many little things like that, notes and columns and just craziness, that, all right, this Garcia thing comes along and I'm thinking, I know I wrote about something like this at the Inquirer. There's a Week in Review column about this. And it, like, for some reason, it dawned on me that the Pirates once started an outfield of 3 guys named Brown. And so I was trying to look that up today. And like, I think when this happens, I really need to defragment my hard drive. Think of the dumb stuff that is rattling around in my brain. It's just taking up space. It's not contributing to the betterment of anybody's life, except these people tweeting at me. That's it.
You need to go on a 2-week vacation to Barbados or something. A 2-month vacation.
I do. I really do.
So I want to just get into, I mean, born in Philadelphia, going to games. I mean, you were a Phillies fan growing up. Is that right?
I was a Phillies fan. That's correct. And I eventually went from being a Phillies fan to covering the Phillies, which changes everything. But I really was a big Phillies fan from the time I was 8 or 9 years old until the time I went to work for the Inquirer.
So were you a fan? Was their first year fandom 64?
That's the first year that I really vividly remember.
Okay.
And why wouldn't you, right?
Yeah. I mean, talk about things you haven't seen before.
I actually tell people now. I actually tell people now it's time to forget about all that.
Yeah,
I wrote that book on the 2008 Phillies that won the World Series, and so I did a book signing tour, and people would actually come to that and tell me all their horrible memories of the '64 Phillies collapsing, and I tried to advise them, you can let it go now, right? The Phillies have won the World Series, and then they did it again. You can let it go, but they don't want to let it go.
No, of course not.
That's part of being a Philadelphian.
Absolutely. But the thing that I think has kind of come out in the last couple of years at least, there's more of an appreciation toward the 64 team than I think there has been in the past. And I think the Dick Allen Hall of Fame, campaign has kind of helped that a little bit. But I feel like people are kind of a little bit better on that team than they used to be.
Yeah, it's a really interesting phenomenon. There's a real fondness for that team, almost if it won. If the rules were the same then as they are now, that team would have won the NL East even after losing 10 in a row, right? Would have gone to the playoffs. It would not be remembered anywhere near the same. And so people, I think in retrospect, have decided apparently they enjoyed that ride. And the guys who played for that team were folk heroes. Dick Allen at the head of the list. He was like my first favorite player.
When you became a beat writer, that was what, 1979?
It was, yeah. I arrived when Pete Rose arrived.
When you got there, I mean, obviously the team was at a place where they were very close and they had nearly gotten the World Series a couple times. Did you get a sense? I mean, okay, Pete Rose is being inducted this year into the Wall of Fame. Did you get a sense that Pete Rose was kind of that addition to the team that did need to get them over the hump?
It sure felt that way. I think it was actually more than just a narrative. It's funny that the segue to this question is the '64 Phillies, because at that point, no team had won a World Series in Philadelphia, and so the '64 Phillies hung over every single team in this town. I don't even think just the baseball teams.
Yeah.
People were in that mentality that Cubs fans were in for a century, that, all right, something's going to go wrong and screw this up. And that team, the guys who played for it, just didn't enjoy dealing with that. And especially after they failed to win a postseason series 3 years in a row. And so that was really, as much as anything, the reason that Pete Rose was brought to Philadelphia. Proven winner, talked about winning, really helped transform the mindset of a bunch of guys who hadn't won. It's not the only reason they won. Mm-hmm. Dallas Green played a huge role in it. Yeah. Paul Owens is forgotten by time. One of the great general managers in the history of this town. There's a lot of reasons that team won, but I don't think they win without Pete Rose. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think, just looking, we did a 50 greatest Phillies games the last 50 years over the offseason, and I wrote a lot about the 1980 Phillies, and it seemed like in every game that mattered that year, Pete Rose had like 3 walks and a base hit or 2 and was all over the field and was doing something. Like, he made plays in center field, for God's sakes. He was doing things that, guys just couldn't do, and it does kind of tell you that, yeah, I think every team does, I mean, not every team, but the teams that at least the Phillies were known as this kind of leisurely bunch. They needed that guy who could just got to get them through the finish and say, no, you can win the World Series. You're better than these teams.
Yeah, and you've heard them all talk about it. So it's not just revisionist history. It felt that way at the time. And I mean, again, you hear Mike Schmidt and Larry Boa and the key cogs in that team speak about it all the time. They needed to hear from somebody like Pete how good they were, and it was important.
In all your years of covering the Phillies, I mean, Pete Rose was obviously a character. Larry Bowa was a character. Even Schmitty at times could be, character. Are there any really interesting characters that, of all the quotes that you got, of all the people that you met, just you love talking to the person, or maybe you didn't like talking to the person?
Well, we were talking about my bizarre niche in sports writing history, and I'm one of those writers who I always gravitate toward the funniest people in the room. And so, the Doug Glanvilles, the Larry Andersons, the Don Carmans, the Jimmy Rollins, those people, they got sick of me. I wore them out.
Give me a Don Carman story, because I didn't know he was funny.
Don Carman was tremendous. There's like the 2 great Don Carman things that I recall that kept Week in Review humming. One was he started his career by going, I think it was, I just saw a list of this, so I know I remember this wrong. I remember it as being 0 for 54.
Okay.
That's how he started his career at the plate. He used to refer to it as that Johnny Vandermeer thing I did. And we just saw a list because Wei Yin Chen started his career by going 0 for 50, and he wasn't on it, so it must have been like 0 for 48 or whatever it was. But anyway, he finally got a hit after going 0 for 48, over 48,000, whatever it was. And then he got to second base and got picked off second base. And and his explanation made a lot of sense. He said, I'd never been to second base. So that was a pretty good excuse. And then the other thing was he was obsessed with like all the cliche answers that players would give to questions. So he actually spent his time coming up with a list of the 50 greatest baseball cliches, and he printed them up. And he told me that his plan was, then rather than everybody have to answer questions after games, he was going to check off the cliches that applied, and then he would hand them out as we walked into the clubhouse. That's pretty innovative, don't you think?
No, that's incredible. I'm surprised. I mean, are there players like that today who are like that, who give you that same sense?
I don't think there's anybody who's quite that out there. Yeah. But there's some pretty amusing players. I don't want to sell them short. I mean, Doug Glanville was different than that, but
he was cerebral.
So cerebral, but so funny. And you could go to Doug with just about any topic. And hey, I went to that well again this spring training when I was doing a piece in honor of A-Rod on all the great moments in special spring instructors, and he had me laughing for half an hour. I was crying, and he was holding one of his kids at the time, and she was literally crying, but I was crying laughing. But like Doug was the only player that I ever remember, like in an actual interview, using the phrase time-space continuum. Although it might have been space-time continuum. I can't remember which.
We'd have to check with him.
Yeah, it was one of those periods where the Phillies were getting rained out or rain delayed every single day when Philadelphia summer weather was at its finest. And so I calculated up all the time that they'd spent at the ballpark, not actually playing, over a period of like 9 days in a row. And so he just felt like the phrase time, space, continuum applied to that. I've never heard that used before. But believe me, I'm going to talk to somebody who knows that phrase.
Oh, yeah, it always comes back. And you were there, of course, the 93 team. Was there anybody in that period of time? I mean, you mentioned Larry Anderson, but anybody, I mean, such an amazing group to cover. Was there anybody who kind of stuck out in your mind in that era?
Well, I had a lot of fun with that team. I would say, there were a bunch of writers that didn't have fun covering that team,
yeah.
But they were a bunch of really amusing people. And since my niche was not so much to say, all right, well, how are you going to screw this up? Why, you don't really belong in first place. My niche was to say, wait, you just won a game at 4:41 a.m.? Okay. So you might remember that that team, in the same week,
yep, they
played the doubleheader, the Mitchie Poo game that ended at 4:41 a.m., 4:47 a.m.? Yeah, 4:41 a.m. And then, like 6 days later, they played a game that wound up going, was it 19 innings, 20 innings? 20 innings, I think.
Yeah, against
right?
the Dodgers.
Yeah, against the So Mitch blew a save in the ninth inning, and so I just made the rounds of that clubhouse, and poor Darren Dalton had to catch 20 innings because Mitch blew a save. And I remember him telling me that, his next day, his knees hurt, his head hurt, his back hurt, everything hurt. It was all Mitch's fault. And he said, and Mitch is like 4 feet away when he's telling me all this. And he said, I think that because Mitch blew that save, he should really buy all of us who had to play for another 3.5 hours like a car or something. And Mitch just looks up deadpan and he says, hey, if I'd known that you were going to have to play another 3 hours, I'd have tried a lot harder. And that was the kind of thing that you could get out of that team. And I remember I went to Larry Anderson on this, and we were talking about how, they played a game that ended at 2 in the morning, they played a game that ended at 4:40 in the morning, and he said, this team does some of its best work between 2 and 5 in the morning.
That's right.
And you can take that any way you want, but I wrote that down and I put it in the Inquirer.
Well, you know how Larry Anderson means it.
I do.
I don't want to let you go without talking about this year's Phillies team, and I'm sure, you've probably watched a little bit of this team at least. What have you seen? So it's mega early, but do you have any early impressions of the team, things that you like or don't like about the team?
Well, I think that their pitching should be a lot more reliable than last year, and their bullpen in particular should be a lot more reliable than last year. And you would think that would lead to them winning more games, except that, if you really look inside the numbers last year, based on run differential, their expected won-loss total was actually 60 and 102. Instead, they won a lot more games than that. Yeah, it's a tribute to the managers, a tribute to all the one-run games that they won. But now that I got all that out of the way, I think what's most interesting to me about this team isn't even so much the team on the field in the big leagues. Yeah. Because I feel like when you look beyond that at what's coming in AAA and to some extent in AA, that's the intrigue around this team. Who in Lehigh Valley is going to be so good that they have to call them up to the big leagues this year? Yeah. Is this the year that J.P. Crawford does it? Is the year that Roman Quinn stays healthy and does it? Is Nick Williams going to do that? Is the catcher going to do that? You go around the field, you can find this in almost every position. And then if they do that, if they're ready, what happens to the group on the field in Philadelphia?
Right.
Who's going to get traded? Who's going to get benched? Who's going to survive? Who's not going to survive? We're now in this process where you can start to look at the team and look at the organization and foresee them playing in a postseason game at some point. And when they do play that next postseason game, who is going to be on the field? How many guys from this team are going to be on the field? How many guys from Lehigh Valley will be on the field? How many guys from Reading? How many big-time free agents that they're going to go out and lavish all this money on will fill out the group. We've reached that point now where it's not so much the standings that matter. It's that path from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain and who's along for that ride.
Well, real quick, since you covered the Phillies for so long, have you ever been a part of have you ever seen a prospect list like this in Philadelphia? Has there ever been something like this when you were covering the team?
Well, the team that got to the World Series, if you go around the diamond, Mike Arbuckle and his group were so good at nailing those first and second round picks that, that's really how that happened. But to have this much prospect depth at once, I think is the difference. The team that turned into the 2008 Phillies, they nailed so many drafts in a row that they had star power.
Yeah, they made the stars, yeah.
Right. I think this system lacks that star power, but has way more depth. So they have so many fascinating decisions ahead that I'm really interested to see what kind of decisions they make and how they make them and how they execute, because they're in a great position with all these prospects and all this money to spend. But to turn that into what happened in 2008, that's harder than it looks.
Yeah, and hopefully as the year goes on, we'll see some of those decisions take root. Hopefully we can talk to you later on in the season about some of those things as they happen. Jayson, thanks for coming on the podcast. I'll let you go, and it's been a pleasure.
Tim, been my pleasure too. Thanks so much for having me on. Enjoyed it.
Well, if any player on the Phillies offense has had a really good start, it is one Cesar Hernandez. Boy, he's having a great start to the season. We were a little worried about whether he was going to have the same successful play as he did in the last half of last year, but has really responded. .393 on-base percentage, .346 average. He has 3 home runs, which lead the Philadelphia Phillies right now. And our Corey Sharp, who wrote about him this past week and if he could be the future of this franchise, and Scott Kingery and all that's going on at second base, I think Corey's got to be pretty happy about how Cesar is playing. You must be gloating.
I am right now. He's making me look good. He's making me look like $1 million right now.
Well, he's certainly earning his 3 home runs again, lead the team. And you wrote about how Hernandez, this is really the year where I think he's proven himself to be a regular everyday player on a top shelf team, and he's certainly doing that right now. But he has Scott Kingery breathing down his neck, and Kingery, no slouch himself this year. He's hitting .313 with a .439 OBP. He's got 4 home runs, which lead the Reading Fightin' Phils. But what do you think about Kingery and Hernandez? I know you said that Hernandez really should be the guy we look at going forward, but 2018, do you think he is the guy at second base?
I do. I mean, especially if he, I mentioned it in the piece that this season's still early, obviously, but all indications are that Hernandez is going to, at least do what he did last year, if not exceed it. And I'm not against Scott Kingery at all. I think you have to find a new spot for him. I don't think you can mess with, something that you have. When and I mentioned again in the piece, Dominic Brown's supposed to be the next best thing, and look what happened there. So I think you roll with the known is my motto, at least for that. Prediction.
Yeah, I mean, prospects are just that. They're prospects. It's, like a prospect, define a prospect is something that could happen in the future, and we don't know what the future will hold for all these guys. And, of course, we have a great system at this point, but who knows if Scott Kingery comes up to the majors and, completely falls flat on his face like Dominic Brown did. Well, to be fair, Brown had a good season, and a good month or whatever. And I still love Dominic Brown, but that's me. But looking at what this franchise has in all the other positions on the diamond, which, of course, they have a lot of bounty out there, let's start with catcher, because this is a place where what is happening at the major league level is not strong right now. Cameron Rupp has had a very slow start to the year. He's hitting .167 with a .286 OBP. He only has 5 hits on the year. Andrew Knapp is his backup, and Knapp really hasn't had a lot of looks so far this season, only 10 at-bats, and he's only hitting 200. But then, of course, there's Jorge Alfaro, who is doing a very nice job in Lehigh Valley with a 361 average, 1 home run, 5 RBI. He's hitting the cover off the ball. Let's look at 2018. What are the pros to having Cameron Rupp on this team as your starting catcher in 2018, and do you think he should be the guy?
I guess the pros are that obviously he'll be a veteran by that point, a pretty a guy who's been here, who knows the starting rotation. He has pop, but he'll probably be that mentor for Alfaro. That would be the pro pretty much for Cameron Rupp being here.
Yep, and as far as Alfaro being here in 2018. What does he give you next year, do you think?
He gives you a lot. I mean, he'll give you, he can hit for average and he can hit for power. And I think behind the plate, I've heard he's had to, work on game calling as well as his defense. But if you're hitting the ball, like he is, if he's hitting right now 361, he can be around between 280, 300. I think we'd gladly take that for whatever he may give up behind the plate.
No doubt. That's all-star numbers for a catcher, of course, and he's really hitting the ball well so far.
Right.
First base, again, another place where there is a struggle happening. Tommy Joseph is only hitting 167, same average as Cameron Rupp right now. Almost identical numbers, actually, with the power, only 1 home run for both of them. Joseph's really struggled out there, and Brock Stassi's sort of been up and down. He's had some moments. He had the big home run, his first hit of his career. His glove looks fantastic, by the way. And, of course, we're kind of grading on a curve because we had Ryan Howard for so many years. But, again, you have in the minors a first baseman who is hitting the cover off the ball. Rhys Hoskins is hitting 324. He hit 2 home runs on Saturday. He's got now 3 on the season. He's got a 676 slugging percentage. Pros of Tommy Joseph being here in 2018 as your starter.
If he's here, a pro would be that he's hit 25 to 30 home runs and knocked in over between 70 to 80 RBIs. So that means, he's a productive player. Obviously, we don't know that now. He's off to a slow start. What I'm a little concerned with now that he's not catching up to the fastball, and he's just not swinging at good pitches either.
Right.
But that's a lot of players. They say pitching kind of dominates April. When the hitters need to get their timing. At much smaller level. I always. In high school ball, I struggled the first few games of the year in the middle of March. Obviously, it's a much smaller scale, but that's how some players are. And, so we'll have to see. But a pro, if he's here in next year as a starter, and you'll know why.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has power, and that's the big tool for him. If that's not there, though, I think it's a very tough road for Tommy Joseph to hoe. Meanwhile, you have Rhys Hoskins, who, has a decent glove down there, but really is just an all-around great hitter. And he's, I think, even right now with walks and strikeouts, I think 5 each to start the year. So this is a guy who has an eye, he's patient, he's getting pitches to hit, he's driving the ball. Of course, he does have, a good offense around him. But I think right now you're looking at Hoskins and saying, this guy, if Joseph is scuffling mid-season, I think you might have to call up Rhys Hoskins.
I totally agree. I mean, I would give Joseph. I mean, you're not going to call up Rhys Hoskins tomorrow, but
right.
I would give Joseph maybe till the end of May. Beginning to the middle of June, around there. I mean, if he's still around 200, I would take a look at Hoskins. Especially if he's still hitting the ball the way he is. I would pull the plug.
Well, that would be some karma because Joseph came up at the end of May last year, of course, with Ryan Howard playing poorly and Darren Ruff doing a pretty terrible job. Finally, let's go to shortstop, where, of course, everybody talks about J.P. Crawford, and he's having a really, really tough season right now. He's only hitting .086. He's got a 200 on-base percentage, which is his bread and butter, but he's not doing it right now. 12 strikeouts, 5 walks. He's just having a hard time here to start up his season here. Of course, he still has a great glove. He still has the good speed. He can get, from first to third pretty decently. The guy in the majors who he's trying to unseat, Freddie Galvis, also not really having a good start to the year. 190 average, a 381 slug. He does have a couple homers. Whoop-de-doo. But with the glove, obviously it's great, but what about Freddie? First, does Freddie belong on this team with his current production if we're in June, July? But also, is J.P. Crawford, should he be on this team, if he's hitting this poorly in June, July?
Well, I guess with Freddie Galvis, I think it's tough to say whether if he is going to maintain this in June or July, whether he belongs on the team. But I think he's got – last year I think he's got enough leeway to where I would just let him go, at least until Crawford's ready, because you really have no one else anyway.
Yeah.
If Crawford were to turn around in July, by July, and Galvis is still hitting where he is, absolutely I would throw in Crawford. We did our staff predictions, a week before the season started, and I had J.P. Crawford coming up the day after the All-Star break. That's when I had him as his first start. So I still think he's still early enough to where he could be on track for that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Crawford and Galvis, I think we're all waiting to see Crawford earn his way to the majors, and Galvis is just basically going to play shortstop until Crawford has earned his way. And even then, it's possible that Freddie still gets a lot of time starting with Crawford kind of getting, a start here, a start there, maybe playing on the bench a little bit. I don't know. But at this point, I think we're right.
Well, I think
–
right. I think Freddie Galvis could be the Andres Blanco, net by next year, where he's the utility guy.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Possible. It'd be a really good utility fielder. I'll tell you that. It'd be great to have his glove still out there. But it is tough watching him scuffle right now. But at least he's in the 8-hole. He's not really hurting in a major way. But, I think we're just playing wait and see with all these guys. And I think we got to revisit this maybe end of May and then see, okay, is this the time to bring up certain guys or to say yes or no on certain guys? But we'll see when we get there. Corey Sharp, PhilliesNation.com.
Yep.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
My thanks to Corey Sharp for coming on the podcast. Also, thanks to Jayson Stark for coming on. Great to talk to him. And thank you to bensound.com for the music. If you would like to contribute music to the Phillies Nation podcast, please get in touch with me, tim@philliesnation.com. We'd love to get your music on the podcast. We would also love to get your stories. Email me with stories about your Phillies fandom at tim@philliesnation.com. You can find the Phillies Nation podcast again on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and YouTube.com/Phillies Nation. Go to PhilliesNation.com for all news, information, and more. Twitter @Phillies Nation, Facebook.com/Phillies Nation, and Instagram @PhilliesNation_. By the way, Jorge Alfaro, again, .395 on base percentage with 13 hits this year, 3 extra base hits. Rhys Hoskins has 6 extra base hits and is hitting .324. Nick Pivetta, 13 strikeouts in 13 innings. It's all coming together, guys. We'll see you next week on the Phillies Nation podcast.